that your album cover in the framed in the background as
It
well?
is. Yeah, you noticed that.
Beautiful.
Yeah. It's a little subliminal messaging in the background on all these videos.
Yeah.
It's really nice. So I went to the Atlantic Music Festival almost 5 years ago now. And I don't know if this has been your new music festival experience, but at least for composers, basically all of our work is done as soon as we get to the festival because we've written our pieces ahead of time.
Mm.
And so we just kind of hang out and don't do much, maybe go to a couple rehearsals. And then the instrumentalists are just practicing all the time. So I basically didn't get to meet any instrumentalists, which I feel is like a significant part of the point of going to these festivals. So like composers meet performers and vice versa. And so I met a couple pianists, including Adam who does really cool paper art. So that's kind of he physically made with construction paper and different things. These kind of this 3-dimensional album cover. So
Mm.
it's just a nice piece of wall art that I like having there. So
Can you tell me a little bit more about what the art means and sort of like how it relates to the music?
oh sure, that's a good question. So the album is Pictures at an Inhibition, which is a clever little play on words. Although there's not really any musical reference to pictures at an exhibition on this album. But I liked the play on words, and it kind of spoke to the album as a gallery of sorts. I think of it kind of as a gallery of songs
Mm.
where each song is distinct from the others in terms of genre, instrumentation, tone. Basically, the only thing connecting a lot of these songs is just that they're on the same album. Just like if you're in an art gallery, maybe the only connecting force between paintings you're looking at is that they're in the same room.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted the album art to reflect that kind of mindset, especially as the album was taking shape and as more and more people recorded their parts onto it, the more I realized like, oh, this is going to be a weird album, like in terms of how many musical styles and instruments we have on board. So I wanted that kind of art gallery aesthetic. And I don't know why. It's like I don't know why I wanted the walls to be red. I just did. And I've never been to an art gallery with deep red walls like that, but I was like, it's got to have deep red walls. It's got to have gold picture frames. And
Mm-hmm.
then I kind of imagined this crowd of people that in the foreground look like distinct like heads and shoulders, but as the crowd kind of goes down the hall, it almost becomes kind of like just a fog or a smoke. It becomes less human as it goes. And so Adam was able to take my vision and make it a reality. And he chose, I kind of gave him the freedom if he wanted to fill in each picture frame with like a tiny little paper painting. And he made the decision to keep the paintings just the blank gold, which I like because then you can kind of fill it in with whatever you're imagining.
When
Yeah.
I first saw the album cover and the artwork, I think my first thought was actually that it's like a train with
Mm.
passing windows. And I looked at it more closely and could see the art gallery, but
Oh, that's
I kind of just
cool.
like the motion as well, which is cool
I
from
like
the
that
angle.
idea too. Yeah, like a train rolling by, maybe got some kind of puffs of smoke.
Right. Mm.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. To those people who are watching this video, this is my good friend Stephanie Liu, who I got to know as a member of the Deep Roots Ensemble. And I've been saying that a lot in these videos, I've been realizing. So many of the people, especially on some of these more bluegrassy, country inspired songs, kind of understandably came from the people in the Deep Roots Ensemble that I've gotten to know. For those people watching who don't know who the Deep Roots Ensemble is, you've missed a couple of videos already, obviously. So you can go back and watch and get filled in on that. And Stephanie plays violin or the fiddle, as the case may be, and does so very wonderfully on Time to Take Flight, which is the closing track on the album.
Oh, wow.
And I think it's a great closing track.
Yeah, it was a really fun experience recording it and getting to make music with Taylor and Allison and you and others remotely during
Mm.
this time. I think it was like one of my first recorded projects during the pandemic.
What other projects have you been doing more recently?
So lately I've been trying to finish up the DMA at Stony Brook. So I'm trying to get some recital recordings done, which has not been going as smoothly as I've been hoping. And
Mm.
I've recently been doing some recording for Sam Beebe's dissertation opera, which has been a lot of fun.
Oh,
Now that
cool.
three of us were in class together with Daria a couple semesters ago, and a couple of online things here and there, but not too many recorded things lately.
Nice. Now, are you still living up in Washington Heights?
So I'm living in the Bronx now.
Oh,
Actually,
is that
moved
right?
up here right before the start of the pandemic. Yeah.
How is the Bronx? I went to, I think it's Lincoln something hospital for my first COVID vaccination shot.
Oh,
But other than that, I have not hung out in the Bronx. So what's have you seen the Bronx? Have you gotten much of a sense of that borough?
so the Bronx is huge, and I live in Riverdale, which is sort of off the one train. And here it's pretty quiet. There are lots of parks around, and
Hmm.
I haven't been to the Lincoln Hospital area actually, but I'm so excited to go exploring more
Mm.
of the Bronx. I absolutely love it up here. I think it's my favorite borough so far. I think this is the third borough that I've lived in.
Oh,
So
wow. So you've lived in the Bronx and Manhattan and where else?
Brooklyn also.
Brooklyn. Oh, where in Brooklyn?
Gosh, I think my first apartment in the city was in Flatbush or something, somewhere like way in
Oh.
the middle, and then I was briefly in Greenpoint in that area.
Oh, Greenpoint. That's
Mm.
nice.
I can't remember the last time I was in Brooklyn. It was probably also over a year ago or something like that.
Probably, yeah.
It's like another end of the world. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you do? Where do you go if you get? Because this has happened to me where I'm just in my house, I'm in my apartment, I'm in my room, I'm getting kind of cabin fever. How do you handle those situations? Where do you go?
Continue to wallow in the cabin fever these
Oh, you
days.
just.
No. Last fall, I think like nature was the best remedy for everything, and it was
Hmm.
I was able to go upstate a number of times to go hiking, and had more time to explore parts north of the city that I really never did before. And so
Hmm.
that was awesome. I'm looking forward to doing more of that as the weather gets warmer as well. And when I had cabin fever over the winter, I think it was lots of really icy cold walks, and seeing the neighborhood dogs was always good.
Yeah.
So, how
Yeah.
about you?
Well, I have a job, a church job out on Long Island,
Oh, that's right.
and that's been really nice. Not only in terms of kind of just financial security, and it's a great group of people, but it also gives me an excuse to seek out nature and natural places on Long Island because there are a lot of really nice natural places. I think being able to go out on Long Island and say, like, well, I'm already here, kind of helps stave off those more desperate moments. There was one point this past summer, I think it was probably July, late June, I just drove to Vermont and I didn't really do much. It's not really a drive you do in a day, but it was a state that I had never been to before,
Mhm.
and I wanted to cross it off my list of states that I'd never been to. And so there's just one day where like around noon, I even got a late start. I was like, all right, I'm gonna drive up to Vermont, and I stopped off at I think it's Mount Greylock. Yeah, it was somewhere in the Berkshires that I'd been before, and I saw that it was on my way. So I stopped and I did a little bit of hiking, but I was woefully unprepared to hike because I had not set out with that in mind. It wasn't really my agenda. So I was wearing kind of tight jeans, and I didn't bring any water, and I hadn't been hiking in God knows how long. So I parked in this parking lot and it said like 4 miles to the summit. I was like, oh, 4 miles? That's nothing. For some reason, I was thinking 4 miles like in Brooklyn, like nice and flat. Like, that's nothing. Sure, I can do that. But this was straight up a mountain. So I think I went like a mile and a half up the mountain and then realized, like, no, they would have to send someone to come get me if I tried to go any further.
Yeah.
And then I got to Vermont, and all I did I stopped off at a gas station and then did a U-turn and went back home. Like I didn't even really experience anything in Vermont.
Although I remember the gas stations in Vermont being like really nice for some reason.
Oh, is that right? Man, I didn't even go to a nice gas station, I don't think.
I
I don't
remember
know where
seeing
it
like
was.
even the gas stations sold like maple syrup and
Mm.
Vermont coffee and stuff like that.
Oh, that could have been. I didn't even go inside. I saw a lot of guys with pickup trucks and camo and things with torn off sleeves. And I was like, you know what? I had New York license plates. I was like, maybe I won't. Maybe I won't go in there. So that's what'll happen if I just have to get out of Brooklyn.
So you got back to Brooklyn the same day.
The same day. Yeah, I got back that night. I did like it. I was actually surprised I was able to get as much as I did in,
Yeah,
with the brief hike.
I have a really positive memory from the gas stations for some reason. Just remember getting like a little, like the cutest little can of maple syrup from the gas station and keeping that for a while as a souvenir.
Hmm.
So yeah,
I feel like it's a good place in the winter.
do you ski?
I I did once.
Yeah, that's about how I am too.
Okay.
I went skiing like once in Vermont. That was it for my skiing
Yeah.
career pretty much.
Were you like, that's I'm done, or has it just hasn't come up since?
I think I was just really bad at it.
Oh,
Or I
okay.
felt like yeah, I sort of did that and more just really enjoyed seeing the nature and scenery, but didn't actually enjoy the skiing part so much.
Sure.
Um,
You did the whole French fry pizza slice thing.
I tried to do the pizza slice thing.
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah.
It's real tough to do the pizza slice. I feel like I had, like the instructor will show you, okay? So normally your skis are French fries. And then if you're going to break, you kind of wedge them out to form this little pizza slice. And you kind of lean back. I would keep trying, and I'd be like half a pizza.
Me too. Yeah.
Yeah, and
The
nothing.
pizza would like fall off the table or something and go off to the side.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't quite get it myself. I went skiing up in Tahoe, and I think the year before, maybe 2 years before, I tried snowboarding.
Before you tried skiing.
Yes, because I don't know. It's probably just like a dumb like high school guy thing, where it's like, I'm gonna snowboard. Who wants two little skis? I want this big, this big chunky board, and I didn't. I think I prefer skis over a snowboard because one of the things you have to do, at least when you get into like the ski lift, is you unhook one of your boots from like the shoe cage. I don't know the technical terms when it comes to snowboards, but and with a snowboard you lock your feet into place, which is kind of terrifying. But when you go on a ski lift, you have to unlock one of those boots, and so you wind up hitting your heel with the snowboard. My left foot would be locked in, my right foot would be free, and I'd be walking over, bam, bam, bam. I'd be hitting the back of my boot with my snowboard, and that wasn't fun. So with skis, at least I felt a little freer,
Mm-hmm.
you know. But I've only done each of those just the one time.
Gosh, don't even get me started on ski lifts. I remember like ski lifts were always so terrifying to me because you remember one time trying to go up a ski lift and then just chickening out from jumping off and going back down. And then the second time I had to do it. And so I just like screamed and threw myself off. That's how I got off. But yeah,
Yeah, my winter sport of choice is figure skating.
really.
Yeah. Like I'm looking back on like my childhood, and I was homeschooled between kindergarten and college, so most of my
Really?
schooling. Yeah. So I was able to do some things during the day through an independent study program, and one of those things was being able to take like skating lessons at the local ice rink. So yeah, it was like a few days ago I was thinking back on that and realizing like, oh, I took ice skating lessons for years. If you'd asked me like, hey, did you take ice skating lessons? I would have been like, well, no, but I like ice skated regularly every week with instructors. And then that's just taking figure skating lessons is what that is. And so I got started on again, it's kind of just a masculinity thing, I think, because I got started on figure skates, and then there was like a definite point where all the boys switched over to hockey skates. They look cooler, the boots, and then they got that really, really thin blade. And I tried the hockey blades, but it's a totally different kind of technique skating wise. And I liked having the toe pick to kind of chip into the ice. But yeah, and it's been so long since I've gone ice skating. One of these
We
days.
actually have that in common. I also figure skated as a kid,
Oh wow.
and did lessons, and yeah, it's been a really long time. So
Mm. How
that's like
how
supposed to be one of the things you're not really supposed to forget, right? If you don't do it for a while, you can technically still pull it out of your brain somewhere.
I think so, because there was definitely one point in college where me and some friends went ice skating, and it had already been a few years since I'd been ice skating at that point. And I was able, once I kind of got on the ice, I was able to be like, oh yeah. But now it's been, gosh, 8 years, something like that, 7. But I hope it's the same. I'd hate to have all that experience and then have to hold on to the wall the whole time. That would suck. How far did you get with ice skating? Like, what was the coolest thing you could do on the ice?
I think like duck squats, is that what you call them? When you like squat down with like one leg out
Oh,
and
cool.
palms like that. I remember being able to do that at one point, and then gosh, the hardest I feel like one of the hardest things I remember learning is like backwards crossovers or something. Those always freaked me out.
Oh, gosh.
Just defying gravity and don't like not seeing where you're going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never got that far. But it's crazy watching like the Olympics and watching the figure skaters.
Yeah.
And they just do that going backward, crossing over. They make it look so easy.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I've never done that, and I don't think I could. I don't think I could ever do that. I could like very slowly go backward if I kind of went like this with my feet. That was about it.
For swizzles, they were
The
called
swizzles, that's
swizzles.
what they're called. That's right. I could swizzle backward, very slow. I could skate on one foot and have my other one behind me. But I don't know if I even tried the one foot out in front. And I remember there were a couple days there where we practiced the simplest jump, where we were kind of holding on to the wall, and then we go, ugh, and kind of just do a 180. And I could never do that without the wall. But I had one skating trick that I would do where I could run on the ice and like pick up my legs behind me. And I don't know if it was necessarily a technical feat, um, but it got people's attention and perhaps even the admiration of others. But yeah, that's about it. That's about it. When did you get involved with kind of new contemporary classical music?
That's an interesting question because I feel like it's such a huge part of my life now with work and my interests that I
Hmm.
really thought about that in a while. I think in college, I got to know a couple of composers, graduate student composers, and without necessarily realizing that I was like interested in playing their music, I just sort of like got to know them and got involved in playing some stuff and had a lot of fun. And so that sort of like planted a seed, maybe.
Hmm.
And then when I got to Stony Brook, my first class that I took at Stony Brook was Daria's analog electronic music class, where we
Yes.
got to like actually like split tape and play with the buchla synth and all of that. And so I think it just kind of like the interests gradually built up.
Totally. It's a slippery slope.
It is.
It's
Yeah.
often that's often how it goes, with composers sneakily bringing people on board to play their stuff. I wish I'd done more with the analog electronic music studio, because it's a gold mine of analog musical technology, and it was so cool being able to get eventually to a point where I could like even just make a bloopy sound and put it on a piece of magnetic tape. I actually uploaded a video back when I was taking that class, a live stream of me kind of showing people around the analog music studio.
Oh.
And it's such a boring video. Because the first hour and 15 minutes, I'm just trying to like figure out what I've done wrong and why it's not making any sound. It's just like me looking at the paper being like, okay, I did that.
Very
Okay.
authentic to the process.
Very much so. Yeah. It's a very realistic introduction, I suppose. You had this really interesting idea about taking, correct me if I'm wrong, but kind of taking maps of natural places and trying, maybe topological maps, and tying that to kind of musical parameters and creating graphic scores out of that. Is that close to what it was?
Oh my gosh, you have a great memory. And I remember you had a piece about like train beers or something, right?
Yes, very different idea.
But yeah, that piece, gosh, I haven't thought about that in a while.
Mm.
That was like my first foray into attempting to create music of my own, I guess,
Sure.
attempting to write anything down. And I remember you guys were kind enough to read or to try some stuff in the percussion studio at one point. And we
Oh
also read
yeah.
something by Sam, didn't we?
That's right. Yeah, it was a nice collaborative effort between the various people who were in that course.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I just wrote a song, not a song. I'm so used to writing songs nowadays that I'm just calling them all songs. Yeah, I wrote a composition for a Yarn Wire residency.
Hmm.
Yarn Wire is a new music ensemble for those who are watching. And yeah, my idea just revolved around what if train sounds and incorporating beer in as many ways as possible. So we're talking beer bottles, we're talking beer cans, we're talking tabs, we're talking opening cans of beer, just any way we could get beer into it, which seems like a slightly more lowbrow idea than yours about kind of environmental issues and raising awareness.
No, I
Um,
think your piece and the concept of your piece kind of like sums up or it kind of reflects my Stony Brook experience. I definitely spent a lot more time on the Long Island Railroad um,
yeah,
than at school probably, and train beers were definitely a big part of that.
yeah. It was a sound world that I was quite familiar with at that particular time.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, thinking back on that, I'm pretty sure, like, I was working on that with Daria in our class, but I was also showing it to Perry in our lessons. And I'm pretty sure I never sent Perry, like, the end result.
Oh no.
I know, because it got recorded, and every once in a while, that'll cross my mind. It's like, wait, I don't think Perry ever got to hear, like, the last piece I wrote at Stony Brook. And then, like, my brain will go somewhere else and I'll forget. So maybe after this, I'll be like, hey, Perry, it's me. Remember me? It's been a little bit. Oh, speaking of Perry, the last time, was it the last time? I think it might have been the last time I saw him. It was either late 2019, early 2020. That was a time for lasts. I was out for a Deep Roots rehearsal, and I think the fire alarm went off, something like that, and we all had to pack up our things and head out of the building. And Perry comes out. He's talking to various people. He knows that. He knows people. He knows everyone. So he's talking to a bunch of people. And then he walks over to me and he's like, hey, what are you doing here? Because I graduated at that point already. And I was like, well, yeah, I'm in the Deep Roots Ensemble. We just had rehearsal and then the fire alarm went off. So we had to get out here and such and such. It's like, oh, cool. How's composing going? How's the composing?
Such a big question.
Yeah. Sometimes not the easiest question to answer. And I said, well, at the moment, I'm not really composing anything. And he said, oh, yeah, that's a shame. It's tough, finding the motivation to compose. It's tough when you're out of school to do that. And I was about to explain, like, no, like I have a commission that's lined up, but I just haven't started working on it because the deadline is forever in the future. But I wasn't able to tell him that before he like saw, the director of something or the president of some other thing, and he was like, "Oh, excuse me, I have to talk to this guy."
No.
And so I feel like we've left it on a note where I'm like, "Oh, I've failed as a composer in the outside world," in his mind. But I'm just like, no, I swear, like I'm doing things. So I'll have to send him an email kind of explaining my circumstances, perhaps.
Yeah, and you can share the album with him and the train beer piece.
Yeah, I feel like he's not one for popular or more popular musical idioms. Maybe I'm wrong though. Maybe I'm wrong. I'll send it his way.
Mm.
And if you're watching this video, you can also share the album Pictures at an Inhibition, coming out on April 30th, and you can hear Stephanie's wonderful fiddle playing on the final track of the album.
Now the end, can we like chat about the piece, the song for a sec? I actually I because we never actually got to talk a lot about it, and so I would love to get like some more context. I'm just curious if you could tell me more about it, and also
Certainly.
about the process of putting it together.
Yeah, definitely. In, I think it was October of 2017, a very bad wildfire swept into my hometown of Santa Rosa and burned down a lot of houses. My parents and my parents' house were fine ultimately, but they had to evacuate for about a week. And, I know many people whose houses burned down. And at that time, I had just started school at Stony Brook, and being 3,000 miles away while something so kind of pivotal and historic was happening in the town that I grew up was quite difficult to kind of grapple with. But as a good musician, I decided to grapple musically
Mm.
with things that were going on. And so I started writing this piece about the real life circumstances of what happened. Basically, late at night, it was probably like 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, my neighbor came over to my parents' house and knocked on the door. And now you don't typically knock on someone's door at 2 or 3 in the morning. My parents were hearing the knock. It's like, what's going on? So they opened the door, and it's the next door neighbor saying, I think there's a fire on the other side of that hill. And we live in a valley. My parents live in a valley. And so we're just surrounded by hills. And so they kind of walk to the front of the sidewalk, and they look over the hill to the north, and it's just, as I put in the song, haloed round in red. Like you can just see the glowing red in the sky behind the
Wow.
hill. And my parents decide, maybe we're going to go. We're going to pack some things in the car and head on out. It was so windy that
Mm.
night. And that plays a big part in the chorus about how windy it was. And so the fire was moving really, really quickly.
Mm.
So by the time they saw it on the other side of the hill, they decided to pack up their things, head in the car, and a fair few people were doing the same thing. But my parents got an early enough start where it wasn't totally bumper to bumper. For that week, we were just kind of waiting to see what happened to the house, and we found out that it did come into the valley, and it came pretty close to our house, and then went up the other side of the valley, kind of burned down all the houses on the ridge. It was mainly in the north of the town, but swept all the way from the east to the west, essentially. And so I wrote a fair amount of that piece about that, but I didn't really know how to finish the piece.
Mm-hmm.
And so the song "Time to Take Flight" was originally a reference to the evacuation.
Mm.
But then, as more and more people that I knew moved away, moved out of California, moved to Idaho and similar places, and as each year there were fires in the region, none have been quite as devastating to Santa Rosa as that one, but there have been others that have come into the city and burned down houses. The more I realized that this was a cyclical thing, and the more I realized that people were moving away, the more Time to Take Flight took an emigration kind of perspective where people are not just evacuating, they're evacuating the state. They're moving, they're packing their whole lives and moving elsewhere. And that's kind of when I wrote the final verse and final chorus about saying goodbye to those places and moving away from them permanently. So
Mm.
that's what the song was about. So I wrapped it up probably a year after I wrote it, once I kind of had the larger perspective on kind of just now it's wildfire season in California. So yeah, it's a meaningful song for me, certainly, and hopefully, for people from Santa Rosa too,
Yeah.
can kind of I was about to say relive the experience. I don't know if they want to do that, but to kind of come to terms with that and how it just keeps happening.
Mm. The imagery that you used in both the lyrics and also in the musical elements and motifs was just so vivid, and I could
Mm.
really feel like that feeling of stirring and the birds stirring, and with the harp section at the end too, that kind of like stirring feeling. It's just, it really made all the imagery come to life. Um,
Thank you.
so yeah, I also remember there was a moment in the one of the later instrumental bridges when the violin like starts a melody, and then the cello kind of takes over the same melody, which I
Mm,
thought was just, I love that moment so much because it just feels like you're kind of letting go of something and almost like represents a different stage in life when the cello takes over and
mm,
leads into the final part of the song.
yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, it kind of goes down to these kind of low Beethoven-y chords. I think of them. So yeah, I'm glad you were able to be a part of that particular piece and of this album.
Thanks so much for having me a part of it. I'm so excited for people to hear it.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, have a good rest of your day, Stephanie, and I hope to see
You,
you
David.
one of these days.
Yeah, same.